McHenry, and I'm one of the original 8 people that started the first Food Not Bombs group in Cambridge and Boston in 1980. And we started basically in after the May 24th, 1980 occupation attempt of Seabrook Nuclear Power Station. And at that, we were involved in Clamshell Alliance and the Coalition for Direct Action at Seabrook. And part of our idea was to do, so we were up there trying to take over the construction site so they couldn't bring in the radioactive material. So one of our group, Brian, got arrested, Brian Feigenbaum, and so he was charged with felony assault of a police officer, even though really he did nothing, but he was a name. Back then you didn't need to give your real name when arrested because they didn't have all the electronics and stuff like that. So a lot of times at these protests, we would all have the same name, like whatever it was at the time, Alexander Berkman or Emma Goldman or something like that. So anyway, but this guy, Brian, was on TV, so his name was under him on the news story because he was chosen to be the media spokesperson. So that's why he got arrested. So anyway, we find somebody with some money that bails him out, and we have to borrow all this money. And on the way back to Boston, we got to do something to pay him back. Why don't we do bake sales? So we start doing these bake sales, but we don't really make any money. It's like under 50 cents an hour basically for all the work we were doing. And so then anyway, so we had a company called Smooth Move, and we're moving this activist family, and they had a poster that said, wouldn't it be a beautiful day if the schools had all the money they needed and the Air Force had to hold the bake sale to buy a bomber. So we thought, well, let's go to the Army Navy surplus store, buy some military uniforms, mount the poster on cardboard, and then we go to Harvard Square or the Boston Commons, and we set up, and then we go, hey, we're trying to buy a bomber, and people would laugh, and so we realized it was a really good way to attract attention. So then we also had this thing called the First National Bank Project, which we were trying to, we decided we would organize around the Bank of Boston because they invested in the Seabrook, but also in the nuclear arms race. And so we had this idea, we'd dress up as hobos, and we'd set up outside the stockholders meeting on Atlantic Avenue at the Federal Reserve Bank, and we would serve lunch and say, look at the policies of this bank could lead to a future where the homeless people, there'll be lines of people waiting to get food at soup kitchens, which was not happening at that time. This was 30 days after Reagan was inaugurated. And so anyway, homeless people, the guys came and they were like, so the night before I go to the Pine Street Inn and I give a talk to the guys living in the inn, and I tell them about how we're going to have this protest and why we're doing it. And so then we ended up, about 30 guys came, and we were able to, they all stand in line and we're giving them food. And the people are going back. That's amazing how people are going, like from the stockholders, it'd be like, oh, screw you protesting us. But then others were like, this is great, you're protesting this bank is horrible. And then I remember this one young man coming by, businessman, and he goes, oh my goodness, Reagan is only in office 30 days and there's already soup lines in America. Oh, we feared this. And then, but the thing that was interesting was, the people that were eating with us, they said, look, there's no food for homeless people. You should just do this every day. We have no food. And so that night we said, okay, we'll just quit our jobs and do nothing but collect food and take it to housing projects and then make meals that we serve on the streets and do street theater every day. So that's what we did. And it was this amazing experience where, but after 6 months, the landlady, Joan Blount, got a hold of us, and she took us to lunch. And she said she was the head of the Arts Commission, and her husband was the head of, she was a widow, but her husband had been the head of the French department at Harvard. And so she goes, I go to cocktail parties and all these fundraisers, and everyone just raves about my tenants doing Food Not Bombs, and it's this great thing. So but the problem is you haven't paid any rent in 6 months. So apparently 600 is too much. We'll lower it to 400, but you got to start paying next month. So then we all like go get jobs, and I ended up having a great job working at Passeum's Coffee House with Bob and Ray Ann, and then the woman Wendy Shapiro, and then we were like a little family and so that was Ginsberg was there, and that's when I met Joan Baez the first time, and I got to hang out with Odetta, and it was just amazing. So anyway, that's how really Food Not Bombs got going. And the very first action that we organized for was the June 12th, 1982 March for Nuclear Disarmament in Manhattan, in the Great Meadow in Central Park, and 1 million people came to it. And then Reagan, after that, actually did agree to all these treaties with the Soviet Union, and the first arms control, and he's the one that brought that in. So it's a very interesting thing, you know. He's maligned for many things, but reality, 1 million people showed up to these protests. There was lots of political pressure, and he was able to work out treaties that lasted for a long time, so like decades. So anyway, that was the first chapter of Food Not Bombs. Then I moved to San Francisco in 1987, and I started the second chapter. And with money we got from American Peace Test. They wanted us to provide food at the Nevada test site to protest nuclear testing. And so we did, and we took all the equipment we bought with that money and set up a Food Not Bombs at the entrance to Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. And then this hippie approached us and asked if we said, hey, you can get a permit for this. Well, in Cambridge and Boston, we were friends with City Hall, and we never had any issues. So I thought, oh, this will be nothing. And so I write a letter to this guy, Peter Ash, at Recreation Parks Department, and instead of, he doesn't respond. And then eventually what ends up happening is on August 15th of 1988, about 45 riot police emerged out of Golden Gate Park and arrested 9 of us for serving food without a permit. And even though we had requested a permit, we never got, that was the response. Now the next week, people were outraged because there's a big photo in the newspaper the next day in the Examiner, or the Chronicle, and people had said, we gotta go protest this is outrageous. So the next Monday we marched down Haight Street, banging pots and pans, and then we got to Golden Gate Park and we set up, and the police arrested 24 people for serving food. And it turned out the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force was there, and they wrote a memo to the San Francisco field office of the FBI declaring us a credible national security threat. And that's what started this whole thing where the National Guard had workshops that Thanksgiving of '88 on domestic terrorism, claiming that Food Not Bombs was, quote, one of America's most hardcore terrorist groups. So it's the weirdest thing. So years later, in April of 2009, I happened to watch on C-SPAN a lecture of the State Department officials, and they were comparing us to Al-Qaeda. And they said that we were much more dangerous but they wouldn't use our name. They called us people that serve vegan meals in the park. And they said but the reason they're more dangerous than Al-Qaeda is they fear that the American people might be influenced to demand their money be cut from military spending and be spent on healthcare, education, and other social services. And if I hadn't have seen that same lecture twice, I would have thought I was hallucinating. But I could never find the name of who said it, and I've never been able to get a copy of it because it's really an indictment on why the U.S. government. Then I was blacklisted from employment in the United States after 9/11 because of my status as a terrorist. And yet I'm vegan, I worked for peace my whole life. I did at San Francisco, I got framed by the mayor's office, and I ended up facing 25 to life in prison. I did a total of 500 days in jail. I settled my 3 strikes case for pleading guilty to assault, battery, strong arm robbery, which I was the victim of the assault. And I so anyway, that's how the district attorney gave me credit for 500 days time served. And but I was arrested 94 times total, 47 felony conspiracy cases at the height of it. They got a court order against us serving food without a permit, and we continued to serve, and that made it a felony conspiracy. So if you got jailed, you got held for at least overnight, but often, for a week or two, just as a way to try to stop us from doing it. And I did actually get captured 3 times and taken to room 136, where they ripped my clothes off of me at 850 Bryant Street at the police headquarters, and ripped my
Where was that?
in San Francisco at 850 Bryant Street at the police headquarters.
Okay.
Yeah, and so what they did was they took me through all these, like through the basement and dark, so I didn't know really where I was going. I only figured it out afterwards. And then they rip your clothes off and scream and yell obscenities at you and kick you and hit you. And then they threw me face down on the ground. They lifted me by my arms and legs repeatedly until my ligaments and tendons ripped. And they had a stress position cage. I didn't realize the name of it until many years later. But
say that again.
It's called a stress position cage. So it's a little cage that was hanging from the ceiling in this case. Sometimes they're just on the ground. And then they put you in there in your underwear, and you can't stretch your legs. So you try to stretch your legs for hours and hours, but you never can. And so it makes you like in so much pain.
Are you in a fetal position?
Yeah, your knees are up against your chest. Yeah. And you can't bend over. You're trying to go like that. You're trying to go like that. It's like crazy. And they did that to me 3 times, and they held me in there 3 days on each of the 3 times. And they threw me out. They handed me my pants. That was all. No wallet, no money, no belt, no shirt, no shoes, no anything. Like into the rain, like it is right now. Just threw me out into Bryant Street. And then I walked to the hospital, and I would go to St. Mary's because I'd had a ruptured appendix operation there 7 days before the first arrest for serving food. I was the first one arrested. You can see on the photos this like white van from the hospital. But anyway, so that's how all that kick-started Food Not Bombs to be worldwide, and now we're like in 1,000 cities of the world at least, and in 63 countries. Okay. So yeah. So after that, we started a bunch of projects in San Francisco. During that whole period, so we were being arrested like in waves from like 88 all the way through to 94, end of 94, and even the summer of 94 really, because it was at the Food Not Bombs World Gathering that they made like 138 arrests during the gathering for serving food, and it was it ended up being that they gave up at the end. In fact, it was very funny. The cops came and picked me up on the last day of the World Gathering. This was our second World Gathering.
And what date was that?
And that would have been in July or June of 94, I believe.
And where were you at the time?
In San Francisco.
Okay.
Yeah. So, 94, might have been 95. It's whenever the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, or the founding of the UN. I think it's something of that nature. They were doing a celebration in San Francisco. We were protesting at it, and we had 1,000 people came to the gathering. The first gathering was in October 10th and 11th of 1992 in San Francisco, and there was about only 70 people showed. And at that gathering, and that was to protest, we were there in solidarity with First Nation and Native Americans, because Pelosi was able to get San Francisco to be the official city to celebrate the 500th anniversary of Columbus coming to the Americas. So Native people all over the world decided they were going to protest that celebration. And so Food Not Bombs decided we would feed those protests. And so we had our World Gathering right before that for 2 days at the Cauliflower Collective in the Mission.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
How did you pay for this food?
Okay, so all of our food is, majority of it is recovered. So back to the very beginning, very good point. So the very beginning, I was a produce worker. I was like 21. 20, 21, I was studying painting in Boston